As entrepreneurs, we are responsible for a lot. And in order for us to get all our ish done, we've got to be responsible for our time and how our remote teams spend their time. In today's episode, I speak with Liam Martin, and he is going to share us all the details on how to get this done. Episode 123 starts right now. Hey there, welcome to the Laura Shipman Show. We hang out here weekly to talk about things like social media, entrepreneurship, marketing, tools, strategies, tips, and it all starts right now. Hey there, before we get started with the show, I just want to share my passion with you. I love teaching people just like you how to master social media for business, breaking it down into easy to consume and easy to execute steps so that you can see immediate results. So whether you want to start a social media consultancy or grow your brand's presence on social media, I can help. I can help you get started and master all the things that you need to know. So I want you to go over to my website. It is filled with resources, tools, tips, and courses. Visit laurashipman.com. That's LORA Shipman.com to get all the goods. Now, you ready for the show? I know I am. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back today. I'm excited to introduce to you Liam Martin. He is the co-founder of TimeDoctor, and Running Remote. And he's going to take us through some things that I know you are going to connect with. Liam, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I am feeling fantastic. It's about minus 15 degrees Celsius outside. I'm in Canada right now. So outside is really horrible, but in here it's nice and toasty.
Nice and toasty.
And I am excited to get into the tea with you. We're going to go deep on remote work and I think a whole bunch of other stuff. So,
yeah, I think so. I'm excited.
That's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be neat to see where this conversation goes. What part of Canada are you in?
I'm currently in Ottawa, Canada, which is the nation's capital in between Montreal and Toronto.
Cool. I grew up in Toronto. I'm American, but I grew up in Toronto.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very cool. Yeah. I travel generally about 6 months out of the year. But Canada, I would say, is a very quiet place to get work done. And if you want to be hyper productive, I think being in countries like Sweden, Switzerland, any of the Northern European countries that are cold. I have this theory that countries that are cold are actually really efficient and productive countries because you need to prep for the winter. Mm-hmm. And because you need to prepare for the winter, your country's culture has this mindset of, well, if we don't start, preparing food and resources for the winter months, we're going to die. So therefore, we have to have a really good work ethic. So if you look at these Northern European countries, they usually have a really good lifestyle because everyone is just this kind of hyper planner thinking about the future. So for anyone that's living in those nice warm countries right now, move up to a colder country. I think your business will run better.
You'll get more done. That's funny. So tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what Time Doctor is, staff.com, and Running Remote. Tell us all about that stuff.
Sure. So my name is Liam Martin. I am a human being on planet Earth, more specifically in the Canadian part of planet Earth. And Staff.com and Staff.com and Time Doctor are both tools for remote teams, specifically time tracking for remote teams. So we've been running that business for about 8 years approximately right now. And then Running Remote was something that we just started a few years ago, which is a conference specifically built on understanding how to scale remote companies. So I was very excited in that subject. We've been what we call a remote first company since Time Doctor existed. We have 100 employees in 32 different countries all over the world. And there was no real place for us to understand how to take us to 150 people or 200 people or 1,000 people. And so since there was no conference on the subject, I decided to take that bullet. It was a ready, fire, aim philosophy that we had. We just cut a check and hoped that people would come. Thankfully, some people did. And 3 years later, it's the largest conference on that subject.
Wow.
So I definitely have had the opportunity to talk to all of these absolute domain experts in remote work and understanding how remote work is evolving and also the best practices connected to it, which is just really cool for me because this is something that I've been working on for the past 15 years. I've been a remote worker for the past 15 years. And only now are we really starting to see remote work truly take off, which is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people who listen to this podcast, they're either solopreneurs or they're entrepreneurs who are getting ready to scale and stuff, and they know they have to, build a team. And the beauty of working for yourself and is working remotely basically. It's like having that lifestyle or that laptop lifestyle. But it's the struggle of trying to find really good remote employees. How do you tell us, or what do you suggest that we do what are some best practices to get us there?
In terms of just finding the talent or
Yeah.
how you should structure your company in order to find the talent? Because I think those are two separate strategies.
Okay, let's start with the structure first, because if somebody's getting ready to do that, what does that structure look like? And then let's go into the other one.
Sure. So, and then after that, we can talk about specifically what type of talent you're looking for, because I think there's various different definitions. There's kind of like your task-based, your project-based, and then your long-term worker. And there's different platforms, different strategies, depending upon the direction that you go. But for us, all of our workers are long-term workers. So some of them have been working with us for 15 years. And critical inside of that is really understanding how to get people to work for you. So you have this plan, right? You have this mission. You have this way that you see the world. And you have to convince others that, number one, this is a valuable mission that people want to be on, so they are aligned to what you're currently doing. And then number two, that this mission is attractive to them. So you might be able to say like, well, we run an affiliate commission company, and the goal of the company is to make lots of money. And that's interesting, but probably you're not going to attract talent that if that's the goal of the company, you're only going to attract talent that is going to try to maximize their own pockets. So you're not going to attract anybody that really is willing to work with you for less than another company, because there's nothing intrinsic inside of that company that really makes people succeed. So the core thing that you have to do, number one, is understand your mission. So for us, our mission statement that flows through everything that we do is we want to empower people to work wherever they want, whenever they want. More specifically, we want to be able to have 1 billion people to have the ability to work remotely by 2027.
Wow.
So we specifically talk about that in what we're trying to do. If you look at companies like Tesla as an example, they'll actually have very quantitative numbers talking about how they want to get people off of fossil fuels and how they're planning on executing on that particular strategy. That's something that inspires people to actually work for you, not necessarily just for the paycheck, but because they actually enjoy what they're doing. And there's other obvious advantages as well. When you get to work remotely, as you had mentioned before, you can work from a laptop. There aren't many people inside of our company that are what are called digital nomads, but you can be a digital nomad if you would like to. And digital nomad, basically, I'm sure your audience knows what it is, but it's someone that has no set address. So they basically live out of Airbnbs or hotels or co-living spaces, and they do all of their work from their laptop so they can travel the world. So there are all of those little advantages that you have to work into it. So number one, it's like core mission, inspiring them to be able to actually do something that's bigger than themselves so that they can say, yeah, I worked at this company and I put a dent in the universe and I'm content with that type of work. And then secondarily, offering them a lot of job opportunities, like employment opportunities that the average employer currently doesn't. We had an employee that recently joined our team from a large corporate company that actually worked in Toronto. And she's currently being paid less than she would have been paid with the Toronto firm, but she's working for us for less because she agrees with our mission, and she is working remotely. And the previous corporation would not let her have a remote work agreement, and we would. So there are real dollars and cents connected to this. And for any employer that's looking to take advantage of this, if you can deploy a remote work agreement and really connect to it, there's a significant cost savings that can happen. Most studies show it's about a 40% overall cost savings from what is called the on-premise model, meaning everyone inside of an office.
So the employer is saving 40% in expenses, you're basically saying.
Yeah, and that comes from two places. It comes from, there's a direct cost savings, which is approximately half of that 40%. And then the other 20% is higher employee NPS, which is Net Promoter Score, meaning the employees are happier inside of the organization, which extends retention. So less people quit.
Yeah, exactly. And so also for that person who is working remotely too, is that when you're building that structure out, do you allow for flexibility of work hours? And is that something that kind of goes with that remote working aspect, that that's what you're signing up for?
And it's really fundamental to our mission statement, which is we want people to be able to work whenever they want and wherever they want. So if it's whenever and wherever, then we don't really care when you work as long as you do work. Right. So we usually keep people accountable to their KPIs. And that's another thing that you have to really understand for not only remote work agreements, but just any type of work agreement in general. I'm blown away at how many people don't have clear KPIs connected to outcomes, right? So you'll hire someone and you'll just say, well, you're a developer and you're going to code this piece of software. Well, how fast are you going to code it? What's happening? What's not happening? You need to start to measure those metrics, and you need to make everyone very accountable to them in order to be successful. And that is so much more important inside of remote organizations because the check-in time has a much bigger delay. So course corrections for an employee take longer to execute on because your feedback loop is longer.
So actually, it's kind of what I wanted to ask about when we're talking about remote workers. Do you have any more things that you want to talk about in the structure part before we move on? Is there anything that we missed?
I think just in general, making sure that you're inspiring your people, making sure that this is a place that they want to work as opposed to a place that they don't want to work. And then also kind of a good mention on this in terms of the things that you should get in place before you start is you need to build process. So process documentation is super critical. You can use something like Google Docs, or if you want to use something a little bit more advanced, check out trainual.com.
Can you spell that?
Trainual, which is like training and a manual. They smash those two words together and it's trainual.com. And so what basically process documentation entails is everything that's inside of your organization, you should write it down and you should digitize it and then allow people to be able to share it throughout your organization. That allows you to be able to create an environment where if someone is in the Philippines, as an example, and you're in New York, that's a 12-hour time delay. So someone isn't necessarily waiting for feedback. They can actually go inside of that documentation, and if they have a question, a lot of those questions can get answered inside of that documentation. And a lot of people think that that's quite boring, and it absolutely is. It's like doing your taxes times 10. But if you go to about.gitlab.com/handbook, there is a fantastic database of what I think is the largest open source remote process document that exists, which is GitLab's. So it's a 3,200 page process document. And GitLab is basically a software to document code. And the cool thing about this page is it's open source. So you can steal that information and you can integrate it into your own process document. And they highly encourage you to do that. So that's a great place to get started. Just kind of poke around that, pull out the major processes that you need, integrate them into your own organization. Things like we had a situation a few years ago where we allowed everyone to produce their own email signatures the way that they wanted. And one of our customer support people had a Bible verse in their signature. And we had a customer who was an atheist that ended up getting really angry about that Bible verse in that signature. And we recognize that we accept everyone regardless of their religious background and realize that that was not the right thing to do. So now we have a specific procedure on how to write out your email signature. These are things that you really need to document in order to be a scalable organization.
Yeah, it's important. It's important it helps you stay on brand as well, because if you have everybody doing these individual things of what they think the brand looks like, you're kind of mismatched there. Okay, so you've got that structure in place, and I know probably a big part of that is the mission and the inspiration as being like the foundation of it, which will probably answer my questions that I'm going to ask. But how do you motivate your remote workers? How do you make sure they're disciplined enough to do their job so that you're not micromanaging them? And you mentioned KPIs, and what does that look like? And those are key performance indicators for anybody who's wondering what that acronym stands for. So can you take us through how we make sure that those remote workers stay on track?
Sure. So that's probably one of the biggest things that Time Doctor solves, which is a time tracking tool for remote workers. So as an example, on this call, I'm doing podcast with Laura. I'm currently at the, let me see here, I'm at like the 21-minute mark for this particular task. And then I can pull that into my podcast project and see all the 400 plus podcasts that I've done over the past year, analyze that, figure out what the exact ROI was for all of those activities that I had done. So that's the way that we do it. We think that it's a pretty useful way to be able to measure people. But if you don't want to pay for a tool like Time Doctor, any time tracking tool or any type of accountability tool is perfect, is fine, just to be able to know what are people doing, and then how much time did they invest in actually getting those things done? Because it's not just about actually getting the KPI completed. We've had a few people, interesting story from our sales team is we were always paying for the highest commission per month. So whoever made us the most money throughout the month would get a commission bonus. And we realized that this was a really bad metric to communicate. And instead, now what we do is revenue per hour. So we do not focus on just who made us the most money, but who made us the most money efficiently. And that we've found has not necessarily brought down our numbers, but it has brought down the hours worked in the sales team, because some of these people were working like 250 hours, 300 hours, because they're very much commission based. They were going to a point in which we recognized if we continue down this line, we'd have burnout. And a lot of those people would not be able to work with us long term because they would just quit or they would have a nervous breakdown. So instead, now what we do is we optimize per hour. That's a different metric to look at, that you just kind of have to really understand what are your core KPIs, and then also connect to the time deployed to be able to make sure that everyone's mental health is taken into consideration.
Yeah, that's like a big push these days, is the self-care part, because I think, before we didn't pay attention to that so much. And we did that burnout routine that you just talked about of, you work all these hours, and that was kind of the way that we recognized hard work. And if the more hours you put in, the more success you're going to gain. And it's not really that way anymore. It's the more efficient you are and the more productive you are. It doesn't necessarily equate to the amount of hours you're putting in. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I mean, a real serious reality is suicide rates are going through the roof, right? So, I mean, in 2001, it was about 30,000 suicides in the United States. In 2016, it's 45,000. So we've seen a 50% increase in suicides in 5 years.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure that's projected to actually double or triple again by 2020. So when you look at those numbers, and there's a lot of factors connected to it, primarily social media, and then also the proliferation of new accessible drugs are really kind of the two major factors in the United States for that increase in suicide. But that's something that you have to constantly monitor now for the reality of a 21st century employer is how are you measuring all of these different variables? Because there's a lot of vices that are a lot easier to get access to. And I believe if you're going to bring someone on into your organization and you're going to have them connected to your mission, then you should be active in making sure that they are staying accountable, not only to the company, but then to themselves and their own mental health.
So, I guess I'll ask this question now is like, how do you make, because I think this kind of falls into it. So you've got several remote workers working for you. How do you build a culture that makes them feel that they're part of a team? Because if you've got somebody working, in California, someone in Toronto, someone like in the Philippines, someone in Florida, how do you bring them all together and build that culture so that they feel like they're part?
So there's a couple strategies that have really started to pop up. And this is something that I would say me giving you this information in 2020 is the playbook hasn't been built yet. Mm-hmm. So it's so new right now. Remote work has really kind of almost achieved an escape velocity scale really in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole bunch of different variables that are coming up that some people are trying and some people are not trying. I can tell you some of the things that we try. So we have on Slack, which is how we communicate messages back and forth throughout our remote team. We have a water cooler chat, which is basically everything but work related. So you can talk about anything and everything inside of that chat. We also have things like we play video games together on paid time. So it's part of your if you want to, you can go and play online video games. To be able to get that type of communication, our only rule is there must be a audio component. You must be able to actually do voice chat during these video games. So they'll play first person shooters or strategy games, those types of things. And they usually end up chatting with their friends or their coworkers that hopefully are their friends throughout that process. We also invest once a year into a company retreat.
Really?
So okay. We fly everyone that works in the company to one place every year for about a week, and sometimes it can extend out to 2 weeks. I would say if you're going to do this, do it for a minimum of a week, even though it costs you a little bit more from a hotel cost. Once you've made that investment to fly everyone, you might as well have them there for a while. And that's really good for team alignment, to be able to get that 1 week of human sync time, face-to-face sync time, to know, this is, I didn't know how tall this person was, or that this person does this other weird thing with their, with their hands or something like that. Those little kind of nonverbal human connections end up producing dividends, I believe, long term. But there's a lot of things that, we're still trying to figure out, to be honest with you.
That's really interesting. But that's good. That's good that you make that effort to fly everybody in. So tell me, we haven't talked about this yet. Like when you're looking for that remote worker, so that you're not micromanaging them, do you look for like a certain like discipline characteristic that they might have, like that they're able to self-manage or self-select themselves into certain projects, whatever? How does that work?
We've been collecting some psychographic data, and we've been trying to figure out, is there a personality type that connects to remote work? The only very strong signal that we've found so far is introversion. So people that are introverted usually have a longer retention than extroverted people. And I can give you an example. The company's product manager is about 5 blocks from where I'm currently sitting right now, and I might speak to him face-to-face once a quarter.
Wow.
He just doesn't want to, he doesn't like communicating with people face-to-face, where I'm slightly on the extroverted scale. So I need to go to a co-working space or a coffee shop like once or twice a week. Mm-hmm. He would be very happy to not do that. And so that's a major thing that you want to be able to look for in terms of talent. The other factor that I look for, which is actually my thesis statement on how to work with people, is I basically tell people I value decision-making above all else. So I'd rather you make the wrong decision than none at all. And that's a super important thing for me, that may be different inside of your organization. But if you're working in a remote work environment where maybe there's a 6, 8, 12-hour time delay, people need to be able to think independently. And generally, almost any decision can be reversed within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So my philosophy is take action on your own. Don't be afraid to be able to make a big decision, even if it's the wrong decision, because I'd rather you make the wrong decision than none at all.
That's really important. I think when people can have control of what, like you hired them to do a job, right? So trust in them that they're going to do their job. And you're right. I mean, everything's pretty much fixable for sure. Right. I really do. So I know that you think that there are there's a difference in location independent entrepreneurship and remote teams. What is the difference between those things and what are they?
There's digital nomadism and AKA location independent entrepreneurship. And then there is remote work.
Okay.
And so if you were to define it as a Venn diagram, all digital nomads are remote workers, but not all remote workers are digital nomads. And so digital nomads are kind of this, I don't know, I would actually call them the new cosmopolitan class, to be honest with you. They usually have first world passports. So people from Pakistan, as an example, do not have the same freedom of movement as Americans in terms of getting into different countries. They're usually relatively wealthy, so they're part of the global 1%. This is something that I always want to put on podcasts. What do you think? How much do you think you need to make in US dollars to be part of the global 1%?
Oh, gosh. The global. Okay, I'm going to at least like $1 million, but I'm thinking it's lower.
It's lower.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like my head wants to go high. Okay, so but my gut is telling me it might be. I'm thinking even under 6 figures. I'm thinking like maybe 70,000.
$32,250 US.
Are you kidding me? I was not expecting that.
Probably a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are part of the global 1%.
Wow.
So when we talk about empowering everyone on planet Earth to work wherever they want, whenever they want, we're not just talking about Americans. We're talking about everyone on planet Earth, right? We're talking about even, we ran a short for Running Remote, which was the story of Fahim, who is someone from Bangladesh who has muscular dystrophy. And he went from begging in the streets, literally selling handmade rugs in the streets, to making thousands of dollars a month off of Fiverr and Upwork.
Wow.
So he completely changed his life. And that's really the mission that we're behind, is being able to have employers and employees find the best of each other through this new global environment called remote work, this new work opportunity. And that's what I'm very excited about when I talk about remote work. Digital nomadism is definitely something that I am a digital nomad. I spend about 6 months out of the year traveling. However, inside of that community, there is, and I would, for people that are listening right now, be very mindful about jumping into being a digital nomad, because I would say, to be honest with you, 95% of what's in that community is bull, because a lot of the digital nomads make their money by selling you something on how to be a digital nomad. And I think that that's very disingenuous. And I just want to make it clear to everyone, I'm not one of those people, even though I run a conference on remote work. That's about 1% of my overall income. The vast majority of my income comes from my software company that is run remotely. And it's very disingenuous to be able to say you can basically just get on a plane, show up at a beach somewhere and live the 4-hour work week. I would say for the vast majority of people, that doesn't work. I have not found someone who has been able to live that type of lifestyle for any extended amount of time. You need to work, right? So it's just, I travel all the time, but I still work an 8 to 10 hour workday every single day. I just do it from really nice, warm places. And so that's what I want to kind of communicate is not all digital nomads are remote workers. The mix actually is probably about, for every digital nomad, there's probably about 20 remote workers. And that's the community that is, works for a remote first company or works for a company that has a remote work agreement. They generally are not, they're in one place, they're working from their home. And that's the bigger movement that we're trying to get behind.
So is that the independent entrepreneurship portion, or is that something different?
That's a remote worker generally is, they have a job.
Okay.
So they work for someone. And you can be an entrepreneur like myself and everyone works for me, but the vast majority of my time, I'm in one location. I'm in one location 6 months out of the year.
Right.
And that's really, I'm just trying to communicate to everyone that the vision of the kind of Instagram digital nomad, which you will see. And it's so like when I'm saying only 5% of remote work is digital nomadism, when you go onto social media, that's 80% of the conversation, 90% of the conversation, when in reality, it's just because there is a machine of people trying to sell you that dream. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to tell you that that dream is a significantly more difficult in reality than it is communicated on social media. And in general, I think you should really kind of look at everything on social media with a grain of salt, something that is very problematic and leads to the suicide numbers that we were talking about before.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because I think that people, they see this polished look of how easy it is, but when you really are owning your own business and you're behind the scenes doing what you need to do, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work that can be monotonous at times. And it really requires consistency for you to follow through on these things that are so routine that you have to do over and over again. And I think the average person gets bored with that. But in order to stay successful and to go after those goals that you've set for yourself, that's just what people don't show. They show the how do I want to say it? The stuff that people fall in love with. They don't show the messy behind the scenes stuff that's so boring that you have to keep following over and over and over again.
You know, the reality of entrepreneurship is very different from what everyone communicates. On average, entrepreneurs make way less than a job. Mm-hmm. If you want to make more money, being an entrepreneur is actually the wrong way to do it. When you just look at the statistics, and everyone listening right now is probably saying, well, I'm not part of that statistic. You're part of that statistic. That's called statistics, right? That's you basically are part of that group of people. The reason why I became an entrepreneur was not necessarily because I thought I could make more money, even though I have, and it actually has worked out for me. I rolled the dice and I won. It's because I had no other choice. I've been fired from pretty much every job I've ever tried to get within about 90 days. I'm not very employable in general. So for me, I recognized if I could, if I need to eat, I'm going to have to run my own system and not be part of someone else's. And so if that's you, you're definitely an entrepreneur. And I think that right now there's so much conversations around entrepreneurship because the economy is really great and everyone thinks that that's the reality. I just read a book recently that in the 1960s, 23% of college graduates saw making money as their top desire for their future. And in 2018, 82% have now seen that as their top desire. So we've seen a massive shift, and I would probably say a much more kind of, I guess, surface level or not necessarily very existentially deep perspective towards existence. And that's not everything. Money is not everything. The pursuit of money is not everything. I think more importantly, being able to do something that adds a positive aspect to society is what I'm very interested in. And I think everyone should get realigned to that, because the pursuit of money, generally, if you're doing things just for the money, you can't keep doing that consistently long enough. You will break down, you will have a burnout. It happened to me, and something that is not sustainable in the long term.
Yeah, it's funny. Both my husband and I, we each own our own businesses. So, and we also work the 9 to 5, and I honestly hated it because for a couple of reasons. I mean, I'm not a morning person. It's just not my thing. And so to have to jump in my car and literally drive an hour and 15 minutes to my job and then drive an hour and 15 minutes back to my home at the end of the day, it was such a physical drain. And once you get that taste of working for yourself and setting your own hours, you end up working harder than you've ever worked before and for longer hours. But you also become instantly unemployable because you don't want to be in that 9 to 5 box anymore. You work for the freedom. And
right.
And I guess I would consider myself like I don't know what I would consider myself because I'm grappling with maybe I'm a remote worker because I'm on teams managing social media for other people. But then I also create content that people purchase from me and consultations and things like that. So I kind of feel like I'm that independent entrepreneur as well. So I think I'm in that mix of two different things.
Yeah, I think the other thing that a lot of people that are listening to this right now could probably grapple onto is, let's say you're making $80,000 a year working for company XYZ. Are you willing to cut your salary in half to work for yourself?
Right.
I am. Absolutely. That's a decision that I would make instantaneously because I realize, number one, I'll be fired from that organization pretty quickly because I end up pulling something that they don't like and they kick me out. Number two, I just don't like working for other people. I have this core desire not to necessarily do that. Now, taking that in consideration, I mean, you got to eat at the end of the day. So sometimes you got to do that 9 to 5 and then you come home and you work on your next business. But it's, I asked this a lot about remote workers. And there was a study done by FlexJobs. I can't remember the exact quote, but in essence, it said, would you trade a 20% pay hike in order to go back inside of an office? And 92% of respondents said no. So it's offering you more of that freedom. It's offering you more flexibility. It's offering you the ability to be able to say, well, I can fly to Miami for the winter instead of working out of Chicago. These are things that really give you that the more freedom to your lifestyle that I think that society right now is really looking for, because we've just got all of these other things that are making us, at the end of the day, a lot more depressed. I kind of call social media the distraction economy. It's distracting you from what you need to do. And I'm one of the purveyors of that. We're listening to a podcast right now, which is a form of distraction. You probably listening to this podcast right now are just like, man, I really need to do my taxes or, write this TPS report or something like that. But you're listening to us instead. Why? Because we're trying to get your attention. And we're trying to get your attention because we want you to consume this content and listen to this podcast for the next months and years and possibly buy something from us in the future. And that's the reality of where we're at right now, is all of these interesting kind of back and forth that are occurring that really result in people that are kind of dopamine out, that just have all of these inputs, and they're getting all of these chemical reactions from this social media machine that is really designed specifically to act almost like a drug. I think it's really negative towards your long-term success. You need to be mindful of that. I think that's the first step. And then also be able to allow yourself to disconnect. I have pulled social media completely off of my phone. The only social media that I have is YouTube. So everything else, if you saw me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, I exist, but it's not me. It's someone that I've hired
to do it. Yeah. So I have a question about remote workers. Where do you see it going in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think it's going to grow? Do you think it's going to decline? Like, where do you think that's going to be?
Sure. Right now, 2018 numbers are 6.5% of the U.S. workforce work majority remote. That's projected to be 50% by 2027. One big study has quoted that. Another study that I don't believe as much says 2025. So there's two studies. One says 2025, one says 2027. Both of those numbers seem crazy to me, but 5 years ago, it was 1% of the US workforce that was working majority remote. So we've in essence 6 to 7x'd within the last 5 years, and that's expected to 6 to 7x again in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's going to be a complete shift in how we understand work. This is going to be something that will allow people, to your point, once people go remote, they very rarely work in a job in an office. The vast majority of those people would actually take pay cuts instead of working in a brick and mortar business. So this is going to be a huge phenomenon that's going to be pushing through over the next couple of years. The Gen Zers, which are the youngest generation, if you're a developer and you're a Gen Zer, 3 out of 5 of those people work remotely right now. Wow. So there's a massive wave that's coming across. In the next 10 years, those people are going to be the 35 to 40-year-olds that are really going to be the core of the economy.
Interesting. Well, we're just about out of time. Is there anything else that you wanted to let us know about remote working or about your business that we should know about?
Boy, remote working is the future. If you're not doing it right now and you don't understand how to actually deploy remote work agreements inside of your organization, you will be replaced by companies like me. So you need to adapt to that reality. This isn't just an employee perk. This is something that is going to be the majority of the workforce very soon. So that's what I'd leave everyone with.
Awesome. Well, I know I'm going to leave some links so people can go and check you guys out. I know you have a YouTube channel that we want people to tune into to learn more. Where else could they find you where they could get information about you and your businesses?
Nowhere else.
Just there.
TimeDoctor.com if you want to check that out, runningremote.com if you're interested in checking out our conference on building and scaling remote teams. And as I had told you before, YouTube for me, I think, is the most honest form of social media. So youtube.com/runningremote is where we talk about everything connected to remote work. And if you can't afford a ticket to Running Remote, we put up all our talks for free, TED style. So you can have access to that content. There's literally hundreds of hours up there.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to put those links in the show notes so you guys can go over there. Liam, thank you so much for being here today. It was a really interesting conversation, and I find it fascinating. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Hey there, I just want to say thank you for spending time with me here today. I know your time is super valuable, which is why I am dedicated to providing lots of usable, actionable information in the shortest amount of time possible. Before you go, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a future episode. And if you have ideas or topics you would like me to cover in an upcoming show, let me know about it in the comment section provided.